What is your opinion on using something that exists versus building something from scratch?
It's a lot of effort. Or I guess it depends on how much effort it's going to take. So, I mean, you're not going to rebuild like a search engine or something like that. Like, you want to reuse it.
Yeah.
But even for something smaller, like, just recently I had to build an offline checker to kind of see, like, okay, like, do they have network? And then if they don't, like, let's ping some sort of icon file and make sure, like, they're truly offline because your browser might lie to you.
Yeah, there's a ton of those libraries out there, little itty bitty JavaScript libraries that tell you if you're online or not.
Or I'm thinking, like, or even the, was it that Node package that took everything down when it got delisted? The trim left. Yeah, no, but sometimes, like, there's things like that, like, okay, like trim left is like the extreme. Like, do you really need a library for that? No, you could just do that.
Yeah, why did that thing even exist?
I don't know, but there's so many things that depended on it. No, but in terms of this offline thing, like, I did some research. I looked for different implementations, and I was trying to implement it into a progressive web app. And the ones that I were finding was, I don't know, I don't want to say them people being too clever, but they were listening to all network traffic and either trying to do a retry policy on it, or they're trying to use that for the offline check as well. So that they didn't have to just like ping a file randomly. It's like, oh, you're hitting network traffic. I got a disconnect error. Therefore, you're offline.
So the use case here was you're building a progressive web app. There's going to be some functionality that is disabled when you're offline. You need to know, are you connected or are you not?
Well, and what was the other interesting part too was I needed the my service worker. So if you think about progressive web apps, you can have offline capability using a service worker. It's always running. It's kind of local to that browser. But I was capturing some network traffic depending on whatever it is, the criteria that I needed to. So what would happen is when I was online, it would make the call. The offline library was intercepting that call, and then the service worker was intercepting that call. So something that should have been one call ended up being 3 or 4, depending on the scenario that it was in. And obviously, it's going to cause performance issues, and it just wasn't going to work for me. And the other ones that were there, like a lot of the documentation, they're just like use navigator.online. Okay, but like but as you kind of dig deeper into it, that's unreliable depending on the browser, because it's not a true status if you're online or offline. And one of the fun things I experienced was, I was in Firefox or maybe using Chrome. I just started using other tabs in other areas, and this is when I was just prototyping stuff out, just making sure how it works. And then I go over to the tab and I reactivate it, and it triggered the offline and online event.
Oh, geez.
So and that makes sense though, because if the browser's like, hey, you're off this page for 5 minutes, let's shut it down.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the true state of how the application was.
So all of these libraries that you found, they failed you in some way, shape, or form. But your first stab at it was, I'm not going to build it. I'm going to find it.
Right, because to me, this is something that seems this is a solved problem, right? And I guess that's really the question, like the determining factor is, am I doing something groundbreaking here?
Yeah.
This is offline checking. This shouldn't be anything new. Now, as I admit to you, and a lot of people, a lot of times, I'm really bad at searching for things online. Probably a skill that I should have, but I just don't. And yeah, they just didn't, whatever I found just didn't work, or it was a simple navigator that online, but like when you really get the brass tacks, it doesn't work that way.
Well, and there's also a security risk too, because the more open source libraries you bring into your project, the more vulnerable your application becomes to different sort of malicious attacks. You want to limit that footprint as much as possible.
Yeah, and I'm doing this in a web environment, and if you know anything, so like NuGet is awesome. The way that it does its dependency trees is it'll only get the dependency once for all the libraries that it needs, and if something needs a later version, it'll just get the later version and it'll use them across all of them. Now, sometimes you get versioning problems and you have to update things that you didn't expect, but you're maintaining one version of a thing more or less. When you get into the Node ecospace, when it gets deployed, it doesn't have that same kind of dependency tree. Each Node package that you download will also download all of the sub packages that it needs to have that package run.
Yeah, it's so stupid. And I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it's like if 3 things need the same dependency, why don't they just share the same dependency? Why does it download it 3 different times?
Right. And it's probably because of the case of like either their security patches or their specific versions that work with certain things. So like it makes it more stable, I think, because
you don't have these
you don't have-
interdependencies. Yeah.
Right. However, then when you look at your node modules folder,
It's huge.
it's gigs long because it's downloaded the same
Yeah.
core thing over and over again. And then you get the problem of the left trim or whatever it was.
Yeah, I do feel though that like the use it or build it, that as we mature in our software development career, we often seek to use it before building it. Like when you're like a green bean developer, you build everything from scratch. You doesn't matter what it is, like you're just going to build it. But as you
Because you don't know any better,
Yeah.
usually.
or there's a level of excitement too. I don't know.
Or you want to learn about how this thing
Yeah.
works and the intricacies. I mean, we talked about this about the game development, right? The differences of you found the packages and you ended up with the completed project, and I was like, no, I'm going to learn everything ground up.
I'm going to build a game engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think as a developer matures, they realize that they take more joy in completing projects and not necessarily the process of getting there. I think if you really love the process, you probably enjoy building things. But if you enjoy the output or the finished work more, to expedite things, you're going to look to leverage what other people have done.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't discount the people that, because I could see some people that just want to know the technical know-how. They don't care if they're ever going to finish anything.
Yeah.
They just want to know the intricacies of like
It's the process.
how the protocol
Yeah.
works, and
I want to learn how Ajax works, so I'm not going to use whatever libraries to do, you know, puts and posts and gets.
I'm going to use the old XHR
Yeah.
requests.
Yeah. But as you mature, and maybe it's, because it's been there, done that. I know how it works. So I don't really care to repeat myself 1,000 times. You look for shortcuts, and for me personally, it's because I'm lazy. I would rather, if I can get something done in 10 minutes versus an hour, I'm gonna choose 10 minutes every time.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also the maintenance aspect of the whole thing too, right? So like I'm thinking another job that I worked at, they built their own test automation framework. It's something that Selenium and it's really a thing that Selenium already had in place, but they wrote their own custom way of doing it, their own UI over it, and now what you have is you have this proprietary piece of information that now when somebody comes in, now you got to maintain it, document it, teach it.
Yeah. I'm thinking about one of the products we worked on where we implemented an open source identity platform. It handled like user authentication. Now we implemented it almost like standard, but like as it evolved, we sort of, I don't want to say bastardized it, but like we turned it into something more than it was meant to be. And it got to the point where we needed to upgrade it, and that became quite challenging because we had modified it so much.
So, side tangent, all that work, unnecessary.
Really,
I figured it out all within less than a day.
leveraging the
existing system, existing framework. There was one project on GitHub that he did not come across.
See?
That literally had the Azure AD implementation in there.
That's not a tangent. It's quite relevant to this conversation. We wanted to integrate with a third-party authentication provider. We wanted like this federated trust between our authentication system and another one.
Yeah, it's kind of treating it like Auth0 more or less.
So we took the route of, well, we conceptually know what we need to do, so we're going to start building it, to do it, only to find out, I don't know how hundreds of hours we spent on that. Hey, it already exists.
Yeah. Well, I also, not all the time was not wasted. Like a lot of what he did was
upgrading it.
Well, no, he also implemented. He also did implementation or enhancements that he needed to as well. So that all came over.
But wasn't there like a .NET upgrade too that he had to do for that?
That he thought he needed to do.
He didn't. He never did it.
Didn't need to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. because I don't know it. This is kind of one of those things of like, this is a tangent. Trust your seniors or not.
Oh,
I was
because
like,
you just told him to do it, and he's
well,
like, okay.
I said this shouldn't be that bad. This should be only a couple days of work, and then now we're a month in, and then I come in because I have the time finally to kind of. I mean, again, this is me probably doing too much, but I finally had a time after a month to help him out, and then I was like, hey, you know what? Let me just see if I can tackle this from another angle. Less than one day up and running.
Sometimes, though, just that perspective is all it takes. Like, it's not a knock on him, but you just kind of, you work a groove in your mind, and you just need that outside perspective to, I mean, that's why pair programming is so...
Yeah, so effective.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. It's not like he didn't ask for help along the way as well.
You're just a bad manager. No.
Yeah, well, no, I was a bad architect.
Bad architect,
yeah.
I had a call today with a client, and they're building a new mobile app. It's a progressive web app, and they're merging with another company who has their own mobile app. And both companies are like, we want to maintain our independence from one another, but we want to leverage each other's assets as best as possible. So I started walking down the road of, well, we don't have a mobile app. You do. You got some of the work done already. Let's lean on you. Let's leverage your assets, and let's build on top of it. That was my first go at it.
Right.
But after talking to the developers, the architects of this mobile app, I'm realizing that trying to leverage what they've built is going to create more problems than if we were to do a loosely coupled architecture between the two systems.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was my default was, you already did 80% of the work. Let's explore whether or not we can use that.
Yeah.
We did. We found a bunch of reasons not to, and I'm still not entirely opposed to it, but right now my direction is, hey, I don't think the pros outweigh the cons in this.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be like tying our two shoes together, and when we each try to take a step, we're just going to trip.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, there's a project that I've just been talking about recently, and we started talking with the owner about it, and it was the question came up, hey, this really sounds like this other module of the system, because and again, this is back to the habit of, especially when you're inexperienced in a legacy system. And I think we had this at my first software job of, well, we don't know what exists here, so the default is let's just make new because we know because we know what exists, so we know how to maintain it.
Yeah.
And a lot of that I think a lot of that shows immaturity on the developer's part, because a lot of us were a year or younger devs, and just not it just having difficulty understanding how the system currently works and how the system was currently built.
Yeah, you have to treat every enhancement to a system, every modification, like you're adding risk and tech debt, future tech debt. So,
because every line of code is risk.
Yeah, so the more you can leverage what you have done, the better. But that's not the silver bullet. There are going to be cases where you should rewrite something from scratch. My example was a great one. Mm-hmm. Your example of the offline thing was a great one. But I think every developer should start with, let me see what's out there, and if that doesn't work, or if that creates more problems than it solves, then you should be confident in your decision to build something from scratch.
Right. And have the idea, and this is, I know what I've said about, the place I was just at. You're going to be challenged on your idea. You just need to know why you're making it.
Yeah.
I mean, because somebody, and this is back to your idea, there might, just perspective might help out figure out why it is or is not a good fit.
Well, and I like to not be too attached to my ideas. I go into every meeting with the assumption that I'm wrong, and I encourage people to challenge my ideas. I know some developers who, when they're challenged, they sort of get defensive and they take it personally. No one's attacking you when they try to poke holes in your idea.
Mm-hmm.
What they're trying to do is protect you and to help you see. Now, some people can be jerks about it,
Yep.
but try to separate yourself from your ideas and focus on the project and the problem.
Well, and honestly, my advice for that is because some people just attack and like that's never going to work.
Yeah.
Right. And it's usually it's either one of two things. It's either the person said it's not going to work and here's the solution, or you got the other person who just completely shuts down. And honestly, for me, you just have to like brush them away because they're not there to help the conversation. Like they're not contributing in any meaningful way.
Now, go ahead.
Well, and like I can think of some people like, I know I've had the conversation like, I don't think that's going to work, but I can't articulate why. Then it's okay. Let's explore this path together and see kind of where you're thinking. And sometimes they come around. Sometimes you see what they are trying to see. But yeah.
I like to also, if somebody says this is a bad idea, they should have an idea or at least be willing to come back to the table later with an idea. Mm-hmm. But for them to just shoot down your idea for whatever reason, a bad idea, if it's the only idea, is still better than no idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as long as it can get the job done.
As long as it can get the job done.
Yeah. And I think I've talked about this with estimates too, right? Like even estimating something, I have to have a front to end implementation. Doesn't have to be good. It just has to solve the problem. And then anything that I present to anyone else is going to be better than this.
Yeah. Like
100%.
That initial plan is never what you end up delivering.
Right.
Yeah. You iterate on that as you go.
Yeah.